dozens of federal agents are surrounding the headquarters of a religious cult.
It was the worst blow the ATF has ever suffered.
Got shot at.
At least 4 federal agents and a member of a cult group are dead.
The man, of course, is David Koresh.
You will overcome through my power. You are mine.
You're raised with just fear. Everywhere is fear.
What he taught is that he was God's prophet, God's mouthpiece.
These people, these Branch Davidians,
they were willing to follow him to the point of death.
It's war.
Well, he'd been saying for such a long time that they were going to come for us. And then they did.
You just see all these black dots coming at you.
Tell them there are children and women in here and to call it off.
This is going to be a bloodbath.
You come point guns in the direction of my wives and my kids, damn it, I'll meet you at the door any time.
You want us to come out, but now you're bringing in military tanks. This is going to be a war.
Flames, as you can see, just pouring out.
78 people would perish that last day, and not a one of them had to.
People still don't understand what happened there.
Just give us the truth. Won't the truth set you free?
I know where I came from. I come from God. I didn't come from monkey. I came from God through Adam, through a long lineage of man. Did Jesus look like the Son of God? No one thought so, except a few people in his day.
David Koresh was a monster. He was a highly unstable, self-proclaimed Messiah who used the Bible and used scriptures as a weapon.
It's war. These governments of this world are coming to an end.
He always said that they would come for us, and we were going to defend ourselves, and we were all going to die.
He was an embodiment of evil.
He was the complete, absolute dictator of every facet of everyone's life.
I'm learning the truth.
Do you think he's the Son of God?
Yeah.
He had uncommonly powerful capacities to manipulate people and instantaneously decay souls.
When I first met David Koresh, in the summer of '81, he had a car that he was driving, and he said the Lord gave it to him. He was a very disheveled kind of guy. He was poor, obviously. He didn't have a job, or at least a regular job. He seemed lost, looking for something, and he was kind of a drifter.
He had been born Vernon Howell.
His mother was very young when he was born, 15.
He had a very troublesome childhood. His mother had been married 3 times. He wasn't particularly the best student in school. He had some learning disabilities.
He was very cute, lovable little boy, very inquisitive, a doer. He learned by doing things, tearing motors apart. First truck I bought him, first thing he did was tear the motor out. And that's the way he did the Bible. He'd search through and dissect it like he did a motor or whatever. But
by the age of 14, he had memorized the New Testament. And by the age of approximately 18, he had the Old Testament memorized.
His mastery of the Bible stunned everyone.
He claimed that when he was a child, God had spoken to him and said, "You're the chosen one. You are my Messiah."
I think back then God was working on David to prepare him for the work he had for him later on.
Bonnie was a very, very charming woman. She's very likable. She took some blame for the way that he was brought up and the fact that she was in a couple of abusive relationships. But I think that somewhere inside of her, she was proud of the fact that he made something of himself. Even if it was infamous, he made something out of himself.
Back in the 70s, that's when all the guys want to be rock stars. Yeah, I thought he had ability, I really did. But as he got older, he wanted not to be a rock star, but to do the kind of music that would bring him to Christ.
This is the Psalms 45 guitar. A lot of people think it's kind of sensual, but no more sensual than the Song of Solomon.
At this point in his life, he's believing that God is speaking to him. And it led to him finding the Branch Davidian group. The Branch Davidians are an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
The thing that made them different was they had a doomsday prophecy. They believed that there would be an end of the world and that when that time came, they were going to die.
Slowly he became their leader and then eventually raised himself up to the level of a prophet.
One of the things about being a Branch Davidian, and especially under David Koresh, was you're supposed to separate yourself from the world. The world is the sins, the flesh, the desires of the world, and you're supposed to be spiritual.
There was no running water, no heat, no electricity of any kind. We had to go to Bible study 3 times a day.
Women had to wear long blouses covering their rear ends, and no makeup ever, no jewelry.
Why did you come here?
Because I heard there was something here that I wanted to listen to.
David can explain this Bible better than anyone that I've ever met.
I'm here because of the truth.
What is the truth?
Well, you have to find out yourself.
So Margarita Vega was a socialite from Hong Kong.
Before they joined the Branch Davidians, these people had a variety of lives. They came from all walks of life.
My mom, she was very glamorous. Always had maids and going out and led the high life, I guess. And then after she joined with Vernon, then she just sort of just let go.
Is he the Son of God?
I hope he is.
I could see that there was a struggle. She wanted to believe, but I knew that she wasn't really sure.
He was polarizing because what he's doing is so radical. He truly believed he had a mission from God.
He told them where to sleep, who to sleep with, what to work, what not to do. He's the Lord of the manor in every sense of the word. He had absolute authority over the air they breathed, over literally the food that they ate every day.
He taught that we should not eat any dairy products. And his reasoning was, well, dairy products are made from milk, which is baby food. Milk is what you drink when you're a baby, and we're adults now.
You could have apples and bananas, but not bananas and oranges together. There was a lot of food combining rules. You couldn't eat fruit and vegetables together.
No sugar at all, no processed flour.
When the winter came, in the very beginning, we would have pots of onion soup, no cheese in it, just onion soup.
My wife got into trouble once for telling someone it was okay to eat cheese, and she was put out of the camp.
So it was almost like he was sitting around thinking of like really wacky ways to manipulate people. But the idea was to test people, to see if they really believed and would really obey when the time came.
You will overcome through my power. You are mine.
We knew it was a cult. We would joke about it all the time, like, yep, we're cult members. But then again, David would always talk about, well, Christianity is a cult. If you look back, Christ had 12 guys following him around. That's a cult.
What's the difference between a religion and a cult in the United States? There's an old joke. About 100 years, right? It just takes time, right? We sprout religions in America. So the Mormons started out, they were cult. Christian Scientists, they were cult. The Branch Davidians were no different.
Everything was a rule. It's more like a prison.
And if you broke a rule, there was a consequence. He even spanked some of the adults.
He became all-powerful in a way that only a charismatic religious figure can to his or her flock. And people were willing to give him their children if they misbehaved. And he beat them quite severely.
We began disciplining our children at 8 months of age, usually, because we were preparing for a time when our children had to obey us like that. This is war we were preparing for. We didn't have time to argue with the kids. If we told them drop, they're going to drop. Otherwise, they could die or we could die.
What I remember as a kid being disciplined was like a 24/7 thing. There's nothing that you could do right, is how I felt as a kid. That fear that nothing you can do is gonna be good enough. You're raised with just fear. Everywhere is fear.
If there was one thing I could take back, I would take back the spankings. I drew blood. There was blood on the paddle. I felt like the most evil person in the world to be beating my baby this way. But this was what God wanted and needed from me.
They were willing to follow him. Were willing to follow him to the point of death.
There's no doubt in my mind that he heard a voice in his head and that he believed it was God. Did it make him dangerous? Yes. He had godlike control.
We continue now with Truth and Lies, Waco.
It was an interesting time in America. The Cold War was over.
I will faithfully execute the...
We had our first baby boomer president in Bill Clinton.
We had the first attack on the World Trade Tower. Ruby Ridge had just happened.
And at Ruby Ridge, a man who had wanted to withdraw from the governance of the United States had holed himself on that mountain, and the government had attacked him, killing his wife, his son.
After an 11-day standoff, Weaver and Harris surrendered.
But it was the first example of the anti-government fervor that was out there that could result in disaster because neither side understood each other.
We don't need the system. We can live without it.
Stand up for yourself! I don't think anybody knew the degree of anarchy that was lurking in our heartlands, the distrust for the government.
God can't manifest his love in this world of darkness. You gotta come up there to find out about God. Come up here.
Mount Carmel was very remote from Waco. It was important for David Koresh to isolate the group from the world because the world is an influence that is constantly pulling people away and distracting you from the message.
Koresh called his compound the Ranch Apocalypse.
It was a 77-acre compound.
The men lived on the ground floor, the women on the second floor, with David Koresh's bedroom up there too. There was a gymnasium, there was a chapel, a large kitchen, and there was a shelter, a buried school bus where they could go to in an emergency.
There was an extremely strong sense of family within that group, and they were that family, and anybody else was not. Anybody else, by their definition, by their verbiage, was Babylon, evil.
My mom and I were best friends. My mother was dedicated to every aspect of her life. She was a favorite teacher, an athlete, just a good, she did good deeds when no one was looking.
Sherry Jewell was from Hawaii, and she took her very young daughter to Mount Carmel to live with the Branch Davidians and David Koresh. She became his 20th wife.
Sherry was an excellent mother. She loved Kiri. I don't understand some of the things that Sherry did to our daughter under the influence of David Koresh.
David Koresh became the most important thing in her life. Everything that she did changed to meet his needs. He was very vulgar and very descriptive, and he talked about sex very explicitly.
He taught things like the Sabbath day was the day for procreation.
The prophets were all given a vision of our time, brethren. You understand that?
He did a lot of things that twisted or just drew that religious belief in a totally different direction.
He used his doctrine to fill the holes in himself. He was always talking about the things that he feared from society, when it comes to his looks, his skinny legs, his big nose, the fact that he couldn't get women. So in order to try to fill those gaps in his life, he created this new prophecy that would do that.
David Koresh called himself the sinful Messiah.
Vernon believed that a sinless Messiah could not relate to man. He could not understand why man sinned. That's why God sent a sinful Messiah. Somebody who could understand why people drink, why people smoke, why people have sex, why they commit adultery.
He revealed to us one day that all of the women were going to be his wives if he wanted them. And I was one of his favorite people, so I just knew that I was going to be one of his wives.
He presented celibacy to the single men, single women, to begin with.
And the line that was crossed was basically that the marriages are dissolved, and David Koresh is going to have all the women sexually.
Most people probably were shocked when they first heard it, because it didn't come all at once.
He wouldn't tell them everything at once, because then you would be like, you're nuts. I'm not giving up my wife.
God told him who to take and who not to take.
I was his wife. He explained it this way, is God would tell him which one. So God would be choosing them. So in essence, God chose me. That's how each woman thought, is I was chosen this time.
My sister became one of David Koresh's wives. She was one of the early ones.
It was a big secret. I don't think he thought everybody could handle it. I think he thought a lot of people would leave if they found out he was sleeping with these girls.
Well, I guess she was 17, something like that.
There were 5 of us to begin with. They were girls. We always thought he was going to go to jail because of it, but for statutory rape, I guess.
He called it the House of David. So yeah, to be a member of the House of David was a privilege.
Being in the House of David, you were sleeping with him. Not all the time, but just whenever he wanted. Simple as that.
I know a lot of people think, well, God, why would you want to marry him and share him with everybody? But it wasn't like that, It wasn't like because, we fell in love and then we got married. It was for a purpose. He said he was God and that he carried God's seed and you could have God's child. And then in the end, you kind of fall in love with him because he was very lovable at times. At times.
Many of his brides were very young, 14, 15, 16 years of age.
I was very conscious of sexuality at a very early age.
Carrie Jewel was being groomed to be his wife.
He would take me on the back of his motorcycle and go up to the mountains. So I kind of knew that I was special because he didn't take just anyone. He wasn't even taking adults on these trips, so why was he taking me?
She was very young. I think she was 11 at the time.
She let it come out that her mom had taken her to a hotel room and that David Koresh was there waiting.
And he was laying on the bed and he said, "Come over here."
He had made her take off her clothes and get into bed. And I don't think I asked her for a lot more details at that point because I knew enough.
I think that at a very early age, I gained the ability to almost exit my body and just not be there. A wall would just come up instantly and I would be gone.
This is just disgusting. It's sick, and it's perverted, and yeah, that's one of the things about David Koresh that probably bothers me the most, and my own participation, and I'm ashamed of it. I am. I wish I would have done something. I don't know what I would have done, but I wish I would have done something.
How could Sherry allow that? That was part of what her job was. Not only did she give of herself, she gave everything she had to give, including her daughter. And she expected the same of Kiri.
Well, there came a time when I was no longer the most important thing in her life, and David Koresh was. And it wasn't even her own salvation that was important. It was just doing what he said was the most important thing. She listened to the wrong guy. She went full speed ahead in the wrong direction.
We continue now with Truth and Lies, Waco.
Most people in Texas have been around guns since they were small children. You grew up with guns.
Squeeze it, don't pull it.
It was just a rite of passage for most young men.
That's it.
It's what people did. It was a good time. People would have barbecues and shoot on the prairie.
Get more potatoes than I know you like it. I'll fight you for it.
God and guns is exactly what sums up Waco, Texas.
I have firearms. Everybody has firearms. Texas has open carry and concealed carry. Okay, and I'm never going to pull my weapon unless someone pulls one on me. Just to go around and brandishing weapons, that ain't happened. That wasn't Mount Carmel either. Those people weren't that way.
Every once in a while, we would get a report that there was gunfire out there.
David Koresh preached from the very beginning that he wanted to militarize his followers. And he started going to gun shows and purchasing huge amounts of weaponry, ammunition.
He thought that the end of all time, the end of the world would come in a great battle between the faithful and the beast of Babylon, who he specifically identified as the government of the United States of America.
It's war. These governments of this world are coming to an end. Go ahead and laugh. Go ahead and muse in your mind and see what happens to you.
They would shoot and have target practice, and there was always somebody up at the guard post 24 hours a day with a gun.
You know, all you were taught was, this is what this gun looks like. This is what this helicopter looks like. When you see it, this is what you do. You're supposed to go inside quickly and tell an adult, and they would sound some kind of alarm.
We would talk about guns and how you didn't want to stick the gun to your temple because you might live. You wanted to like stick it in your mouth and point up. You know, and now looking back, I can see, well, why would we have been talking about that stuff if it wasn't a reality, or if we weren't planning to do it?
They prepared you for war because that's what the belief was. Everything had to be military style. My mom's job was to sew the vest, bulletproof vests that they were using for protection. There was just this level of an impending doom.
Did Jesus tell the apostles to carry a sword with you? Yes. Peter cut off a centurion's ear. Jesus put it back on. So in a time of war, nations against nations, when someone hurts somebody else because the government says to fight.
In his theology, that it was the responsibility of the elect, of the faithful, to fight as hard as they could, to take up arms. And that would bring down the host of angels that would bring about the end of time.
Well, he'd been saying for such a long time that they were going to come for us. And then they did. They came. And they did exactly what he said, what he said they were going to do.
One of the reasons that the Branch Davidians started to get investigated by the ATF was because one day a delivery man for UPS delivered a box of grenades to David Koresh, and the box broke open.
When the sheriff's office received this information, we shared it with ATF. You start wondering about what is this all about, and you start thinking about the automatic gunfire reports that you'd had a year or two earlier, and you're wondering what exactly is happening out there.
It was around June 1992, and I was actually working the ATF hotline desk. And my buddy called me up, says, listen, I've got an investigation. It involves a group of people, it's like a religious group, a cult.
The investigation was into illegal firearms manufacturing, and then there was also allegations that child abuse was being conducted by David Koresh.
We're going to remove that animal from these children.
The operation was named Operation Trojan Horse.
There were 77 agents actually involved in the initial raid on the compound. It was more than a simple search warrant. Honestly, it felt more like a military operation.
We had kind of staked out a mock compound, and then over the course of a couple of days, we ran through a series of mock search warrant executions.
We were to go up and secure the arms room and the Koresh's bedroom. The Dallas team was scheduled to go in through the front door, go up to the second floor and clear the second floor, and that's where we understood most of the women and children would be. The Houston team would clear the bottom floor. The men all lived on the first floor. The rest of the team would go out and form a perimeter around the construction area and keep anybody working in the construction area from getting back into the compound. We were outgunned to the max, so needing to get inside and make sure that we kept them from getting to their weapons was extremely important.
Even though I'd run hundreds of warrants with the special response team, nothing to this scale.
Usually we'd just be hitting a single house with maybe 1 or 2 people inside, but this time we were hitting a large structure that had as many as 150 people on the inside.
You just happened to have a really, really ridiculously stupid plan that put them in that position, which should never have happened.
Several of us agents looked around at each other and said, no matter what, this is going, because look at how much money is being spent.
The undercover part of the investigation involved ATF setting up across the street from the compound.
They put in 4 40-year-old ATF officers to pretend that they were students.
And when they were moving, they didn't move in furniture, they moved in equipment, that it was in cases. So it was very suspicious, needless to say, right off the bat.
They installed several special agents in there. One of them in particular was Robert Rodriguez.
Robert Rodriguez was an ATF officer who they planted into the Branch Davidians to join the Branch Davidians at the very beginning of their investigation.
He was there to try to infiltrate the Branch Davidians to find out the extent of their engagement with automatic weapons, grenades, and things of that nature.
Robert Rodriguez's role, I think, is much bigger than anybody really anticipated, because he was really the voice of what was going on inside Mount Carmel. He was witness to the control that David Koresh had over all these people.
If you sin against the Holy Spirit, Christians, can it be forgiven?
No. Do you feel you're special? Well, if I'm special, it's because people think I'm special.
The FBI underestimated the charismatic control David Koresh had over this faith community.
David Koresh was training soldiers for God.
These were religious zealots.
These are people who believe that the apocalypse is going to come when the American government starts it. That played right into their own understanding of what God's teaching was and how history was going to unfold. Every step they took played into the apocalyptic vision of the Branch Davidians.
We continue now with Truth and Lies, Waco.
Videotape the beating of Rodney King takes the stand.
The satellite picture shows a few clouds over the northeastern corner of the state. Temperature of 47 degrees in Waco.
I remember it being a cold day, drizzly, overcast. I remember driving, thinking, okay, we're really out in the country. This is a rural operation.
Making the short trip to the Branch Davidian compound, because I was going in first, a lot of things just go through your mind.
There was a news crew from a local television station that had learned of the impending search warrant. In their quest to get a breaking story, they got lost.
There was a mailman who saw members of the media and asked what was going on.
The postman turned out to be a Davidian.
He immediately went back and advised David Koresh that the ATF was on their way.
Robert Rodriguez had gone in on that Sunday morning, and he was trying to get a feel for what was going on there.
David Koresh sat Robert Rodriguez down and said, I know you're a plant. I know they're coming.
Koresh came back, he told Robert, he said, they're coming for me. ATF and the National Guard, they got me once, but they'll never get me again.
he shook Robert's hand and said, "Good luck."
So he went back to the ATF commanders and said, they know we're coming, but they didn't listen to him.
I told them what happened inside the compound. I advised them that Koresh knew. I advised all the people in the undercover house. They know we're coming. As long as I live, I'll remember those words.
I don't think a lot of those agents wanted to go through with it.
I followed orders. I got ready and I went.
One of the biggest mistakes I made was not just stopping there and saying, look, we can't go. We've lost the element of surprise. We got to call this raid off.
They got to a point of no return. David Koresh knows you're coming. This is going to be a bloodbath.
The choppers are coming in across the creek bottom from the northeast, and they were coming directly towards me. They broke over towards Mount Carmel.
I could hear something rumbling, and it's coming right at us. I could see inside the back of the trailer, and it didn't have cattle in it. It had ATF agents.
We see a little SUV behind us, and it's the media. Everybody in the back are like, hey, what are they doing here?
The two trucks and the trailers have turned onto the property now.
When we pulled in, somebody came over the radio and said there's nobody outside.
Well, they were walking into an ambush.
We had close to 150 people sitting inside this building, and we were going to try to make entry through the front door and through windows on the roof. It was very spooky.
I was still in my pajamas, and I was sitting on the top bunk. I was looking out the window, and you just see all these black dots coming at you like little ants.
I recall stepping out of the truck. Almost immediately, I start hearing pops. Pop, pop, pop.
They were never able to determine who really shot that first shot.
We just got shot at. We got like 6 rounds.
And it's like everybody starts shooting at once. You couldn't hear anything.
I looked out the window and saw tons of people in black clothes jumping out and running toward us with guns.
David came down the hallway and he said, I don't want anybody to do anything stupid. I'm going to go talk to them. So don't take any action in your own hands. Let me handle it.
Heard him open the front door, and the next thing I hear him yelling out, hey, wait a minute, there's women and children in here.
I look up and I see Vernon Howell at the door, and I was running straight at him, yelling at him, police, search warrant. He backed up and he shut the door.
And then all these bullets started coming from the outside in.
The minute David got shot, there was people that retaliated.
It seemed like a pop here, a pop there, and then boom, 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 pops everywhere.
All of a sudden, I'm seeing just holes appear in front of me. And at that point, it was like, wake up, stupid, they're shooting at you.
Just as they started firing, my mom ran into the room, and she grabbed me. She put me on the floor, and she put her body over me because she was trying to protect me.
All these bullets were coming through the window above my son's head, and all that glass started falling in his face. All I could do was sit there and wonder what's going to happen next.
I saw a couple of ATF agents put the ladder up, and they're going up. And I said, all right, we got to shoot this video.
So there was a lot of rounds coming by. You could hear them zipping over your head.
I thought they were going to come in and kill me at any second.
I stepped through the window and went into the room. They started shooting through the walls at us. I took 2 AK rounds, one in my thigh and one in my hip. I remember falling down and trying to get up.
You're looking at mortality in the face and thinking like, damn, I'm not going to get out of this thing.
One of our agents returned fire and he was shot in the head. It was the day before his 26th birthday.
I remember walking through the hall, and you could see bodies on the floor, and my mom had left me under the bed. I don't really remember much after that.
3, 2. The first firefight was probably 30 minutes nonstop, and I'm doing a play-by-play.
There are confirmed casualties inside, and there are 2 or 3 officers hit.
An ATF agent yells at me.
Cameraman! Camera! Hey! Ambulance!
Run to your truck and call for help.
Ambulance, got it!
That's when we began hearing that different ones had been shot. As I got close to the entryway, I could hear water running, and I thought, that's strange. Turned to go in, and somebody's laying on the floor in a pool of blood and water.
They said 16 wounded, 4 dead.
Our coming there that morning was in fulfillment of a prophecy that David Koresh had. This is the way it's gonna end. We're at the hands of the beast, and we were supposed to be the beast.
We continue now with Truth and Lies, Waco.
The standoff has been going on apparently 3-2-1. The standoff's been going on about 45 minutes now. Inside, there are at least 2 injured officers, possibly more. We are pinned down right now ourselves behind a van about 50 yards from the compound.
We had no idea how many were wounded or dead inside the compound. Gun battle was still raging. Our overwhelming objective was a ceasefire.
911, what's your emergency?
There's 75 men around our building, and they're shooting at us in Mount Carmel. Tell them there are children and women in here and to call it off.
Wayne was instantly on the phone with 911, trying to get them to communicate with the people on the ground to get them to stop firing at us.
I hear gunfire. Oh, hello? Hello? Call it off!
You hear the gunshots, and I'm thinking, this is getting out of hand. I'd had an 8-hour class in negotiation prior to that. About 2 or 3 weeks before it, I guess it was.
Wayne, listen to me. Ceasefire, they will ceasefire. They want to remove their casualties, okay?
As a peace officer, you want to be in control of the situation. I didn't feel like I was in control.
So you've got 3 people down. 1 person you sure is dead. Are you injured, Wayne? I'm under fire. Okay, I know you're under fire, but are you hurt? Wayne, cease firing. I have a right to defend myself.
They came in with force. They shot at people. We tried to talk to them. They wouldn't listen to reason. It was crazy.
Hold on, Wayne. Well, don't let this line close, okay?
We did lose the call. I called back and got hold of Koresh.
Now, who am I speaking with? This is David Koresh. Okay, David. The Notorious.
He was cool as could be, separated, compartmentalized, cold. That's not normal behavior.
Why'd you guys do that for? You see, you brought a bunch of guys out here and you killed some of my children. We told you we wanted to talk. No, how come you guys try to be ATF agents? How come you try to be so big all the time?
The huge question mark was, who are we dealing with? What's their psychological makeup?
David. There's a bunch of us dead. There's a bunch of you guys dead. Now that's your fault. I know it sounds crazy to you, but you're going to find out sooner or later. Sure. There are 7 fields.
Can I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
All right. We can talk theology, but right now.
This is life. This is life and death. The theology we're going with is life and death.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to get the firing stopped and help to people, and he's not focusing on that.
Are we dealing with an individual who is totally delusional and genuinely believes that he is the Messiah? Or are we dealing with an individual that's even more dangerous, more cunning, because he's basically a con man?
We knew that we were attacked, and we knew that a bunch of our people died.
Someone had said David was shot. It went from David's dying, this is it, what are we going to do?
We thought he would probably be dead by the end of the day. He even phoned his mother and left a message.
Mother, it's your boy. They shot me and I'm dying, all right? But I'll be back real soon, okay? I'm sorry you didn't learn the seals, but I'll be merciful, okay? Tell Grandma I tried, and I'll see y'all in the skies. Bye.
The rapid fire activity of this sort of weapon, just constantly pounding at you, a very warlike situation.
After a while, the ATF weren't shooting anymore.
They were out of ammunition. I think there were like 17 rounds between all of them. They had no bullets left.
I heard someone running up and down the hallway saying, ceasefire, we're trying to negotiate a ceasefire. Everyone stop firing, stop firing.
All right, they said yes, they're going to hold fire. All right, let me get on the other phone.
And slowly and with great care and caution, agents began to get up.
That was the first time I actually saw just how many there were. Man, it's almost an army.
I remember thinking, we just survived a raid with the government, and I'm still alive.
Okay, move out.
Do it!
We were hoping to be able to pull this thing off without injuring any children, and all of a sudden we've got 4 of our guys dead and 28 of them shot up.
Pulling dead agents off the roof, going into the backyard, taking a wounded agent out of there. I just don't understand what went wrong.
I think that the leadership of ATF put their agents, men and women, into an impossible situation, and they were given a mission which they couldn't succeed in.
But we are seeing now this exodus coming out. We're
There were men and women that had come to fight, and they were taking the dead.
There wasn't any room for me anywhere, so they put me on the hood of a Bronco.
That's when it hit home that this is for real. You know, the real world has just hit your front doorstep.
Watching the ATF agents as they walked away, they had this look on their face like they did not expect to lose, and they did.
These people, these Branch Davidians, I think they wanted to die, and this was the way for them to do it.
We saw our fellow agents get killed. You can forget it, but we're not going to forget it.
We lost 4 agents that day.
My feelings were, this is not over. When a cop goes down, it's a free-for-all. They want revenge.
We wanted payback. So let's go regroup and let's go finish this thing.
I got a call that morning. It's a little siege going on in Waco, Texas, and we don't think it's going to last more than 2 days. I was there for 51 days in America's longest running siege in modern history.
For us, and then they did.
It's war! There's 75 men around our building and they're shooting at us. Pop, pop, pop.
And all of a sudden, we got 4 of our guys dead.
Who am I speaking with? This is David Koresh. Okay, David, the Notorious.
He had godlike control.
He hadn't had any publicity like this before.
The man, of course, is David Koresh.
David Koresh.
David Koresh.
They were willing to follow him to the point of death.
I'm talking to you. Somebody's going to get hurt.
Tell them there are children and women in here and to call it off.
This is going to be a bloodbath.
Tanks are making their way closer and closer to the Branch Davidian compound.
You come point guns in the direction of my wives and my kids, family, I'll meet you at the door any time.
We don't lose the game in law enforcement. We win. We play to win.
You claim to be the Messiah. Lead your people out now.
You want us to come out, but now you're bringing in military tanks. This is going to be a war.
We're going to tear this place down. It's time.
Dozens of federal agents are surrounding the headquarters of a religious cult.
It was the worst blow the ATF has ever suffered.
At least 4 federal agents and a member of a cult group are dead.
It was shocking, the killing at Mount Carmel, and it was an instant national story.
There were hundreds and hundreds of people and cameras there.
At any one time, we had over 2,000 members of the media that were there.
It didn't take long for every national show, every local station within 100 miles to be there.
We knew the eyes of the world were on this.
It's been a very tense few hours at Mount Carmel.
Vernon Howell has proclaimed himself the second coming of Jesus Christ, and he's very well armed this time around.
He hadn't had any publicity like this before.
The man, of course, is David Koresh.
David Koresh.
David Koresh.
And that's what David wanted, was everyone to pay attention to him finally.
Mr. Koresh and others.
And he was getting what he wanted. All eyes were on him.
He loves this attention, and the longer that he feels that he's able to capture the attention nationwide, we believe he will continue to hold out.
Within minutes, David Koresh was talking to the press. CNN got through.
Mr. Koresh, your group has been described as heavily armed.
We're heavily armed, all right.
How heavily?
Well, that's the thing that we don't want anybody to have to know.
There was a film producer who was able to fax to David Koresh a film rights contract.
Everyone ready?
The media was asking, why didn't you arrest Koresh somewhere out in the city or somewhere, you know, so you wouldn't endanger all these women and children?
Our intelligence was he wasn't coming out of the compound. Therefore, we did not have the option of exercising that particular strategy.
Well, they told many lies once they started having their daily press conferences.
There were reporters that were able to dispute some of the things they brought out.
Neighbors and business owners are telling the press Koresh has been seen repeatedly outside the compound in the past couple of months, jogging on a country road, shopping.
He liked to go out and drink iced tea and eat nachos at this little restaurant at the mall.
I'm almost positive that he had come in and had lunch a couple of times, almost once a week.
He had a landscaping job at the little community college up here. He was seen all over town.
They could easily have had a sting operation and arrested him outside the property. I don't know why they didn't.
They were trying to make a big publicity stunt to show the world what they could do. And in doing that, they lost sight of the mission and they put their people in peril. You should never have done a tactical operation against that facility, ever.
For some Americans, this was a legitimate law enforcement operation against a cult that was stockpiling weapons, and for others, it was an overreaching and violent federal government.
Nobody planned on coming out alive. We were all going to die. There was not going to be a giving up situation.
They were totally dedicated to their cause and totally dedicated to their leader. This was not a passing thing.
Many shall see it and fear and trust in the name of the Lord.
It's all a part of the apocalyptic theory that gives them salvation. They're gonna try to make you kill them. And that was a big part of the problem we had there.
Now, Jim, you're a damn liar. Now, let's get real.
David?
You listen to me. You're sitting there and telling me that there were no guns on that helicopter?
I said they didn't shoot. There's no gunshot.
You are a damn liar.
It was a tense and difficult situation, and the more violence that has occurred already, the bigger the challenge to achieve a peaceful outcome ultimately.
The stalemate has now been going on for more than 30 hours.
It doesn't seem at this time that cult leader David Koresh or any of his followers are ready to give up just yet.
Federal agents are still trying to coax Koresh into giving himself up.
Oh, you're telling me the children are innocent, but yet you want to keep them in there?
Look,
what is the purpose for that?
Hey, none of your business. You people just are so arrogant, so proud, and so foolish. Why don't you learn the everlasting gospel? Why don't you believe Revelation 14? Why don't you fear God and give him glory?
The focus from the very beginning was, what can we do to end this thing peacefully? And of course, the main focus was on the children.
Let's send them out of that house right now.
No.
We learned pretty quickly that there was only one decision maker inside. There was no consensus. There was no management team.
What I'd like is for you to send a couple of children out before it gets...
It's not possible. I just asked him. He said no.
Okay.
David Koresh was the absolute leader inside, and his word was final.
David agreed to send them out 2 by 2 if we would read a specific scripture that he gave over the radio.
My name is Dave Koresh. I'm speaking to you from Mount Carmel Center.
We got 6 children out the first day.
He says he will release more children 2 by 2.
He knew that those children would appeal to the public.
A total of 10 children have been released from the compound.
He wanted the public to think that if they died at the hands of law enforcement.
But still, there has been no surrender.
Caring for our children on this earth was only part of what we had to do. Saving their souls for eternity was a whole lot bigger job.
Kathy and Mike Schroeder were a married couple at Mount Carmel. They had a child between the two of them, but she had 3 children from a previous relationship.
Sunday, my husband was killed by ATF agents. I want everyone to know he was just coming home to his family. He didn't kill anybody, that's all.
She was really devoted and very angry at the government, understandably so, early on. But everybody's got some vulnerability, something that may get them, that's stronger to them than their devotion to Koresh. And that's what we had to try to figure out.
It was one thing for me to die for what I believed in, and I was ready to do that, but I wasn't real sure I was ready for my kids to do that.
That emotional need, that psychological need, that maternal instinct overrode her devotion.
As much as I believed the message, I really didn't want my kids to have to die. I knew that they could make it in this world and make it in life, even if I wasn't here. And I'd rather they have that chance to life.
We had a clear sense from talking to the parents when the children would come out that these parents love their children as anyone would love their children.
Hi, how you doing? Fine. They treating you good? Yeah. Okay. Remember what I said. God sits on the throne.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi, Heather. I love you.
Hey, Mark. Huh? I love you. You be good boy, okay? Okay.
But we also had a clear sense that these adults, these parents, had a significant attachment and loyalty to David Koresh.
Is coming out not an option that you're comfortable with? Could you come out with some of the children? Yourself?
Not yet. Thank you very much.
I knew that my mom didn't want to be there, but I think when you're that far in and you're not given much of a choice or options to think for yourself, you do what you're told to do.
She asked David if she could go, and he said no, because he only was gonna let the children out.
My mother never directly told me what was going on. As soon as she found out I could be let go, she packed, what little I had, and she gave me her necklace. It really is the only thing she had. She wrote a note to my sister. She said her goodbyes.
The FBI confirmed that 7-year-old Joanne Vega is safe. Her stepsister Ursula told News 4 she just got the word.
Yeah, I'm just glad she's out and she's safe, and if anything should go wrong, that she wouldn't be caught in the crossfire.
I just saw Joanne, and I picked her up, and I just hugged her. And I started crying, and she started crying, and I couldn't let go.
That was like the only time I felt safe through the whole thing, is when I saw my sister for the first time.
The note that my mother had included said, "By time you read this note, I'll probably be dead. Take good care of Joanne. She's yours. Love you much, Mom."
18 children have been released from the compound, and 20 other children are believed to still be inside.
The kids are being taken to emergency shelters that have been set up especially for them. A team of specialists is assessing each child.
While we watched them, we learned a lot about the belief system of the Davidians.
If you like shooting us in the head, why don't I shoot you in the head?
They would have these songs they would sing, consistent with this final apocalyptic event. Younger kids would draw a picture of the compound with fire coming out of it, and I would say, "What's that?" And they go, "That's none of your business. You'll find out."
We continue now with Truth and Lies, Waco.
There has been no break in the standoff at a fortified compound near Waco, Texas. The leader of a religious cult and other armed members of his group remain inside the compound. They are surrounded by hundreds of police and federal agents now.
Discussions continued over the telephone and...
In the first few days of the siege, as the nation turned its attention to Mount Carmel, everybody was wondering, what's going on in there? How many are there? How many children? How are they living?
They had stockpiled enormous amounts of food. I was like, wow, they really were expecting something to happen because they were ready.
The food was rationed, the water was rationed.
We were lucky if we got 8 ounces a day. You had to have your bath and clean your teeth.
There would be 2 MREs, military meals ready to eat for every individual a day.
That was not pleasant. Potatoes au gratin. We used to call them potatoes au rotten.
What they least understood is the fact that the people inside there weren't a bunch of bank robbers. We weren't a bunch of terrorists. We weren't a bunch of criminals. We were a community of people living together.
What can we do right this minute to get things moving so we can get this thing maybe resolved today?
Well, you can tell these agents that as an American citizen, somebody has stepped on my property, and there's going to be some butt whooped over this. Either my butt or it's going to be their butt.
The average hostage barricade situation, even though this was anything but average, lasts in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 hours. Little did I know what I was rolling into.
Do you know what the name Koresh means? It means death.
If you're dealing with a manipulative, egomaniacal character like David Koresh, you're in for a heck of a ride.
We tried to find a lot of innovative and creative ways to establish a relationship of trust.
We made a request that they prepare a videotape of the folks inside so that we could put a face to a name and get a sense of their personalities.
Want to see one of the holes here? It's kind of painful.
Hey, this is my family. It may not be like your family.
We were stunned when we saw all those precious little kids that were his biological children.
Her name is Serenity.
One of the things that was very, very clear is that these kids were afraid of David. In the way they behaved, the way they complied, the way they interacted with him.
Hey, you love me? Have a kiss? Thank you. Who's treated you good?
David.
When David says, hey, come here, they were robotic.
We got a lot of insight, the absolute unwavering commitment to David Koresh and his ministry.
Don't you want to be with your children?
Yes, I would much rather my children be here with me. But I would not like to be out there because I know that what I'm doing here is for a reason.
Is anyone holding you here against your will, Kathy?
Only God.
Only God.
Only God. It's His will and His will be done.
That question and answer that was asked of each one, are you here on your own free will? And they said, yes.
Yes.
This is my home. This is my way. This is where I want to be. And David is the person who is leading us in the way that gives us meaning.
This is where the truth is, and where else is it? This is where existence is for me in the world. I mean, there is no existence outside.
I'm not being held here against my will.
I came and I went as I pleased, and I've decided to stay as I please.
They may have made a decision that people think is ridiculous and tragically wrong, but it was their decision.
You come point guns in the direction of my wives and my kids, damn it, I'll meet you at the door any time.
We responded by sending in a video of the 4 or 5 of us who had spoken to him up to that point and showed him pictures of our family.
I have a family too, and these other gentlemen who have talked to you, they have families.
We can show you pictures.
Yes, I'm an FBI agent, but I'm also a human being. I'm a father. I love my kids, and we know that that's exactly the way you feel, too.
I mean, this is stuff that does not come out of the negotiation playbook.
Standoff near Waco is in its 4th day today with no end in sight. The FBI says 90 adults and 20 children remain in the compound.
David, how could we resolve this? I mean, how could we save these children and women and...
Give me the coverage.
Okay, I'm going to get your scripture message to the radio station right away.
We came up with the idea of saying, well, if you'll record a message, and in that message, you promise to peacefully surrender, we did that. And we were very hopeful.
FBI agent John Wallace brought the tape to the station at 1 o'clock this afternoon, and it was broadcast over a religious network.
We made an agreement with the ATF agents that if they would allow me to have national coverage with this tape, that all the people would give ourselves over to the world.
So everybody packed bags and got ready to come out.
Say see y'all soon.
We're all prepared to receive them and bring them out. All of a sudden, everything went quiet.
Right now, we just don't know. Despite his pledge to surrender over 7 hours ago.
We will keep vigil outside Waco at this compound all night or forever, if that's what it takes. Back to you.
We said, David, we need to get this moving. We aired that tape just like you asked us to do, and you promised to come out.
That I'm willing to come out. It just lies between one thing. My God told me to wait, and that's all I'm doing.
We're dumbfounded.
He gave us his word.
I know that. I'm aware of that.
That after the message was played.
Yes, but what if there is a higher power than you and I that speaks to an individual? Be aware of who you're dealing with.
Koresh reneged on it. He changed his mind.
What can I say? They call me a rambling man, don't they?
David was a liar. He was a deceiver, and he was masterful at it.
When we finally heard that, I knew this was going to be a long-term ordeal.
FBI command took this in a very angry way.
Keeping one's word does not necessarily apply to Mr. Koresh.
When God told him not to do something, he didn't do it. So I understood that part of it, where other people laughed at him.
It sounds like he's making a fool out of himself.
It escalated things to a point where, in response, the FBI advanced onto the property with its tanks.
Tanks are making their way closer and closer to the Branch Davidian compound.
The paradox of power is the harder you push, the more likely you are to get resistance.
You want to go knuckles to knuckles now. You want to have it all out.
Why are you doing this? We're talking and being rational, and now all of a sudden your consequences include cutting the power and having tanks come onto the property.
That was a conflicting message to them. Like, you want us to come out, but now you're bringing in military tanks. This is going to be a war.
I'm talking to you. Somebody's going to get hurt.
Negotiations are ongoing with David Koresh.
Koresh and his followers have been barricaded inside now for 10 days.
Federal agents say they're trying to maintain some sort of optimism as this ordeal trudges on.
Another frustrating day for law officers now well into their 4th week of a standoff with cult leader David Koresh.
We knew that there was something going on within the FBI. There was something going on within the teams, and clearly they were not on the same page.
We were having a disconnect between the hostage rescue team and the negotiation teams.
The tactical teams are very different. They're action-oriented, right? To a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And they looked across that field and they saw a big one.
You went back on your word. That is a lie. That is not a lie.
They did so many things to try to provoke us.
At night, the compound continues to be bathed with spotlights as loudspeakers blare messages.
David Koresh, pick up the phone. Negotiators are attempting to get a hold of you. They would like to speak with you.
Then they started playing loud music.
Trumpets trumpeting, telephones ringing. They had helicopters buzzing over us, anything to keep you on edge.
The FBI says it will continue to use bright lights and loud noises to try and drive the remaining cult members from the compound.
Really, that's all you could think of. These were desperate measures to try to get them out. I think it was a real sign to us that their negotiations were not going well.
Frankly, it was terribly embarrassing for the negotiation team.
I did not agree to that. You
Well, let's agree to it then. Let's agree to it.
Absolutely not.
We become ever more mistrustful, obviously, of their actions. What they say and what they do are two different things.
That's the main reason you never want to have your tactical people convey a different message than what the negotiators are saying. You lose credibility.
It seemed to me like everything they did was a dare. It's like, okay, what are you going to do now? Come on. We want you to shoot. We want you to shoot.
Up to this point, agents have stayed at least 150 yards from the Branch Davidian compound, but now they're beginning to move in.
Steve,
Quit controlling these guys. I mean, if you got guys out there right now pulling their pants down, men that are mature, they're sticking their butts out in the air and flipping the finger.
Give me a moment. See, the guys that gravitate toward, riding in tanks, jumping out of airplanes and stuff like that are a little different mindset than you and I.
With you.
I think Steve Schneider was probably the most important of the followers that David Koresh had. Steve was a religious theologian from Hawaii. He and his wife went to Mount Carmel to live with David Koresh.
My name is Judy Schneider Koresh, and this is my daughter, Mina.
What brought you here in the first place to Waco, Texas?
To study with David.
The very sad part about Steve Schneider is that he truly loved his wife, and his wife became one of David Koresh's wives.
David, anything you'd like to say?
When you see that videotape, the person you hear behind the camera is Steve Schneider.
What about Mina? Does she want to say
You want to
anything?
say hello to your grandma?
Steve and his wife were trying to have a baby, but she got impregnated by David Koresh. And that broke Steve's heart. And the FBI was trying to use that to get him to turn on David Koresh.
They've got a picture over here that shows you with Judy. She's a very attractive lady.
This is true. She is.
Do you have to share her with them?
Steve is so totally and completely committed.
We couldn't quite get over his devotion, ultimately, to Koresh.
The realization that that is the level of absolute control that David had over all of those people was a real eye-opener.
The 40th day of the siege at David Koresh's compound is ending just like the other 39, with Koresh and his followers on the inside and federal agents outside waiting for something to happen.
As the siege went on, anything over time loses its intensity. People would go out there and almost a tourist attraction.
And my little girl wanted to see it.
It became a kind of gag you'd hear on late-night TV.
Lisa, wife number 12, also her age. No age minimum for the King of Kings.
All the while, the tension was building, the misunderstanding between the federal government and the Branch Davidians.
We are going through a very frustrating and disappointing period in the negotiation process.
They agreed to let Koresh's attorney go inside. It's unprecedented that you would let a defense attorney go into a crime scene.
Let me just say this one.
When the lawyers came out, they presented that Koresh would surrender after he wrote down his interpretation of the 7 seals.
That's probably another lie.
He was just playing games, playing for time. He had no intention of coming out.
We are not going to be jerked around.
At some point, it appeared that you had to take some type of action.
What other options do you have? Wait them out, throw a fence around it, and call it the Federal Correctional Institute at Mount Carmel?
I know one thing was talked about. Should we kill David Koresh?
Or force them out. And the way you do that is through the introduction of a non-lethal chemical agent, namely CS tear gas. 51 days had passed. We hadn't had a person out in over a month. We haven't had a child out since the 5th of March. Enough's enough.
We continue now with Truth and Lies, Waco.
Nothing about April 19th started normal. Nothing. It was windy.
The winds were blowing about 30, 35 miles an hour. It's very strong.
That wind comes from 1,000 miles away and nothing stops it.
That morning, we thought we were just going to have a regular routine, except this time, when I looked through the binoculars, I saw a tank with an extended arm, and then we realized they were going in.
This is not an assault. Do not fire your weapons. If you fire, fire will be returned.
I got on the loudspeaker and stressing that, David, you can stop this at any time.
David, it is time to submit and surrender to the proper authority.
Over the loudspeakers, he said, we will begin to put gas into the building.
This gas will temporarily render the building uninhabitable.
The strategy is to make things so uncomfortable for Koresh and his followers that they will come out with their hands up.
This standoff, David, is over.
The tank came in through the front doors, the 2 double doors, and it just blew everything back. It was amazing to see a tank come through your living room.
Exit the compound now, and no one will be injured.
So someone started to run up and down the hall, waking everyone up and telling them to get their gas masks.
Everybody grab your mask. Everybody grab your mask.
There were no gas masks for the children, so the parents were soaking towels in buckets of water.
If you had your gas mask on, you were fine. But if you took it off, even for a second, it would burn your eyes.
Exit the compound now.
So hour after hour, this horrifying scene unfolded with the tanks tearing apart and pouring gas. And then it seemed suddenly,
That place is on fire.
the place was engulfed in flames.
It started just a few minutes ago. As you can see in this 40-mile-an-hour wind, it seems to be spreading quite rapidly.
The fire originated in 3 different locations simultaneously.
I didn't see the fire start, didn't see where it started or who lit it or didn't light it.
Everything set it on fire themselves.
We didn't understand, was this an accident? Were the Davidians killing themselves?
I'm persuaded by the recordings of what was being said inside Mount Carmel that David Koresh and his most loyal followers decided to set the fire.
I believe that David Koresh started the fire.
the building was being destroyed slowly. I think the Koresh saw that. Oh, okay, now the building's on fire, so I'm in control.
The lookout tower is engulfed in flames.
David had told the mothers to take all the children into the vault, which was the bottom part of the 4-story tower.
We had a bunker that everyone goes into, all the women and the children, in the event that the end of the world were coming.
The interior staircases did collapse, and so the people that were on the second floors were trapped. They couldn't get out.
From the very beginning, David Koresh has made it very clear that he was prepared to die.
The wall started to catch fire.
And I felt this tremendous heat up above the ceiling over my head.
I could hear my hair crackle. And when the hair starts crackling, that's a huge wake-up call.
This 40-mile-an-hour wind is just whipping it way beyond control. It's a burning fireball on the top of this building.
As the flames started growing in intensity, I made a statement to David. I said, David, don't end it this way.
You claim to be the prophet. You claim to be the Messiah. The time is to lead your people out now.
There are 95 people inside, of them 17 below the age of 10, a total of 25 below the age of 18.
Why didn't they come out? You know, there were kids in there. And you're going, I don't understand this.
For 51 days now, they've been adamant about saving the children inside of there, and this is just a horrible, horrible sight here.
I could hear some of the ones that were further back into the building behind me screaming. It sort of galvanized me. I jumped up and headed for the hole and ended up jumping outside.
My thought on exiting the building was I'd rather be shot than to burn.
I looked back over my shoulder and the hole was a mass of flames. I thought, nobody's getting out of there now.
The thing that really made my heart stop was when there's this huge explosion on the second floor. Honestly, for all the media that was there, I think we were all dumbfounded. We knew that this was the end for them.
Flames, as you can see, just pouring out. And I think those of us who have watched this certainly did not expect this.
I wish I could give you more information on survivors.
Emotionally, I was numb. I was quite literally in shock.
At the very end, David Koresh had a bullet wound right in his forehead, which came from a rifle where he died next to Steve Snyder.
Many of the people died of gunshot wounds, some self-inflicted, some inflicted by others.
Only 9 people survived the day of the fire.
78 people would perish that last day, and not a one of them had to.
We were not successful in getting those children out, and boy, that was a traumatic thing.
We knew that everything that we had done had been totally futile.
Those people inside didn't have a choice because of their beliefs and their allegiance to one man.
And God says his word is what I will be.
We continue now with Truth and Lies, Waco.
This is kind of my homemade museum about Waco. I want people to be able to see what really happened 25 years ago. When I think of Waco, I think of murder and cover-up. There's so many unanswered questions.
Whether you liked David Koresh or hated him, it didn't matter because this was an armed group of U.S. paramilitary forces attacking U.S. citizens.
I'm mad that they did this in our name. They did this in your name. They murdered those people at Waco in our name.
Waco's a touchstone. It means something about the potential threat that government represents to ordinary Americans.
Waco, you could argue, was a catalyst because you had these people marinating in their belief that the government was the bad guy.
There are still many more questions than answers.
Suicide or murder. What do you think happened?
Government officials blame David Koresh for the deaths of 86 cult members. But some of those who fled the fire say the federal tanks set the compound ablaze.
The congressional investigations heard a ton of testimony, and people go back to it today. It's all online. They want to hear the facts from the people who know them.
What, in your mind, was the consequences of waiting them out?
It is not believable to say that the reason you went in was because of the children.
Did you have any warning that they were going to burn the place down?
Didn't you consider that fire might well occur?
What the investigations did was simply demonstrate that we could not even agree on the truth of Waco after it happened.
Were you aware that the gas mask couldn't be used by the children and infants?
There is no doubt in your mind that those fires were set by anyone other than the Davidians.
What went wrong with ATF? What went wrong with FBI?
We have been confronted with a very serious question of cover-up.
There's this intense scrutiny, public opinion, and all this is bearing down on you.
Department of Justice put a gag order on us. We could not respond.
The more we don't talk, the more wild theories come in. So by not talking about it, you're just letting them run with whatever they want to believe.
The world still doesn't know the whole story. Here's where it gets crazy.
So many conspiracy theories have formed out of Waco.
There was a government conspiracy to get to Branch Davidian.
It was Clinton himself, not Attorney General Janet Reno, who was calling the shots during the botched invasion.
For people who are on the hard, far anti-government right, Waco is the parable the government is out to get you.
There's a common thread in all of this. They always destroy the evidence. What do they have to hide?
But here's this extreme anti-government conspiracy theorist.
You need to call for indictment to Janet Reno,
who has his roots in Waco. It shows this isn't history. It's not the dead past. It's a living thing in American politics today.
Why do you allow yourselves to be manipulated?
The images we saw in Waco and that 50-plus day siege were so authoritarian that I think it began to awaken some of the more revolutionary feelings I had.
Timothy McVeigh was there and was so affected by the incident at Waco that he became an anarchist.
He comes there on a pilgrimage, and something goes off in him. It begins to crystallize this murderous anti-government vision that he has, that it ends up in Oklahoma City.
Federal building in Oklahoma City was rocked this morning by what some are speculating was a car bomb.
The attack may have been revenge for the federal raid in Waco, Texas.
Had we been allowed to be more candid, out front, responsive, and honest with the American public, I don't think that bomb would have ever been set or detonated at Oklahoma City.
The most unfair criticism is that the FBI killed these people. You always have to remember, the man behind that curtain was David Koresh. He chose that day to put kerosene or flammable around the compound and light a fire, and he chose to take others in his own life. That is David Koresh.
This place will always be a battlefield museum.
We're going to rebuild you a nice, beautiful church out here.
We had people from 43 states and 2 foreign countries come to help.
People are going to be coming out here probably forever, wanting to understand what happened here.
We rebuilt the church is for a memorial to the people that died, and we did it because we wanted to kind of say to the government, don't ever do it again, or we will rebuild.
There are Branch Davidians still living and worshiping in America.
We all agree, no matter what side we're on, that the children of God are getting ready to face a very difficult time in this world.
We were willing to die whatever way we had to die, if it meant standing for God. Sometimes we have to be tested. We should have had a greater faith in God.
God's will was that they died. He allowed it to happen. I think the devil was at work too, but God allowed that to happen, so I have to accept that.
David Koresh was an individual who truly believed he had a mission from God, and he died for it.
The memorial in Waco I have been to several times. It just brings back this senseless, useless feeling that this didn't have to happen.
Just never forget February 28th, 1993. That's who we are. It shaped us. We lost 4 good men.
Ultimately, I would say we never had control over how it was going to end. That was David. he made that decision.
I don't think people really understand how evil he was. He led his people into death, and how sometimes, no matter your best efforts, you're not going to beat them.
There was a lot of mistakes made from both sides, and I'm not angry enough to point my finger at either side and say, you know, how could you do that?
Just give us the truth. Won't the truth set you free? I think we can handle it.
It's not going to bring back my parents. It's not going to bring back all these people who lost their lives.
If I could speak to David Koresh, I think I would just ask him why. Why would you want to kill this many people to make a point? What happened in your life to make you think this way? You know, help me understand.
I can only believe that God was working through him. That's my hope. If I didn't believe that David was right, I couldn't handle this situation.
I know that David was the real thing. One way or another, he believed it. He believed that he was given something. And he made other people believe it because he believed it so well.
I'm reminded of a verse directly from the Son of God himself, Jesus, who said, "Beware of false prophets. They come to you like lambs, but they're as ferocious as wolves."
I miss my son. I mean, I'm going to see him again someday.
David Koresh is coming back with God's army. And if I'm at the right place at the right time, I'll be gathered up with him.
You're going to see whether you believe this message. I'm ready to be delivered. I'm ready to go to the portals of darkness and death. And you're not. Let's see if you believe the message after so many years.
Monday, Ari's already on the ride of his life.
I have an amazing group of women.
And the girls are already driving each other crazy.
Take some time and reflect on what you just did, because there's a lot of angry people here, and I'm just the voice.
The Bachelor, all new ABC Monday.